Hello, this is Colleen Pearl, the Cool Crone, and welcome to my channel. In this video, we will discuss the upcoming eclipses for 2024 and dissect what eclipses really are. We will be looking at both the astronomical point of view and the astrological impact. If you'd like to book a reading with me, please go to my website, thecoolcrone.com, and look for Book Now. There you will see a listing of all the things I offer, as well as have an opportunity to book a reading. Thank you. So let's start off with figuring out what causes an eclipse. And to understand this, we need to understand the orbit of the Earth and the Moon. So the Earth, pictured here in this diagram, orbits around the Sun, which is back here in the background. And just to make this diagram simple, the orbit of the Earth is represented by this red line, and this is the ecliptic plane. Now imagine that the Earth is actually doing a big old rotation around the Sun, which takes approximately 365 days to get all the way around. But while the Earth is orbiting the Sun, as we know, it is spinning on its axis. And its axis here, the north-south axis, has nothing to do with anything except for the equator. The equator demarks the middle of the sphere. Almost sphere. We're not quite circular. We're a little more egg-shaped. Okay, so this ecliptic plane, as shown in the diagram, looks like it's just 0 degrees. It looks like it's just flat, normal. It probably isn't, but just for the simplicity of this diagram, we'll just agree that this is the line or the plane on which the Earth orbits around the Sun. Now, in addition, we have the Moon orbiting around our planet. So the Moon is going around the Earth. There it goes. And it's at a little bit of an angle to the elliptical plane. You notice? So the white orbit here does not quite coincide with the red line of the ecliptic plane. And in fact, the Moon is at about a 5-degree angle, which is just enough so that we don't have eclipses all the time, basically. Okay, so it's only when the Moon crosses this ecliptic here, going up the north node, and here, going down the south node, that we get an eclipse. And this is what causes those visually dramatic eclipse moments. When you have a solar eclipse, and I'm going to explain these in more detail a little bit later, but when you have a solar eclipse, the basic mechanics are that the Moon is in between the Earth and the Sun. When you get a lunar eclipse, it's the Earth that is in between the Sun and the Moon. But that's not all that is required for the actual eclipse. What we need for the actual eclipse is the north and south nodes. Here again is a different perspective on the diagram of the orbit of the Earth around the Sun and the orbit of the Moon around the Earth. So this is kind of looking down on those orbits. So where the Moon's orbit crosses the ecliptic or ecliptic plane or orbit of the Earth around the Sun, when it's going up on that 5-degree angle, we get what we call the north node. And then as it continues on around at 180 degrees across that circle, as it's traveling down, we get the south node. Now there's nothing really there on the ecliptic or the Moon's orbit. It's just the understood intersection of those two orbits. Because what happens then is we get an eclipse. So when the Moon is very, very close to the north node it will be opposite the south node, and when it's very close to the south node, it'll be opposite the north node. So it doesn't really matter whether it's the north or south node, you're still going to get an eclipse. And it's not the Earth that is close to the nodes. It can't be close to the nodes, and the sun can't be close to the nodes. It's the moon. The moon is the only object that can really intersect the orbit or the ecliptical plane and get close to the nodes. And that's what causes the eclipse. And this happens about 4 times a year. Now, in some years, there's more eclipses, but generally there are about 4 eclipses, 4 times that the moon comes into crossing the ecliptic plane. Without the moon connecting to one of the nodes, we just don't get the eclipse, because without crossing that orbit, the blocking of the sun or the moon would just not occur. It's mathematically impossible. But just to be clear, what makes eclipses different from regular full and new moons? Eclipses are different than regular lunations because of the connection to the nodes. And what is the astrological effect of eclipses? Well, they're very powerful lunations. You can think of them like full moons or new moons on steroids. The energy is very unpredictable, and they bring about endings and beginnings that you don't necessarily choose. And eclipse energy can be felt well before the eclipse takes place, as if the universe were gearing up or preparing for the event, especially if there are other planetary aspects in effect or other planets moving into place that will support the action of the eclipse. Now, throughout history, leaders and monarchs were born on eclipses, which is a very powerful beginning. Eclipses would also signal the death of a king or ruler, which is a very powerful ending. In ancient civilizations, they were interpreted as potential apocalyptic events. It's no surprise that they have a powerful effect on us and usually deliver their fair share of drama. Now, the node connected to the eclipse can also give us a clue as to how it will manifest. A south node eclipse can bring about powerful endings, because that's what the south node brings into our lives. A place where we have finished up what was there, taking up our energy. So in other words, with whatever that was, we're done. A north node eclipse is a harbinger of something brand new, something you may not feel ready for. The universe is going to set things in motion so that you are absolutely set on the path for this new beginning, and you may not even realize it. So consider the nodes. If the eclipse is connected to the north node, then it will relate more to new things or things related to where your own north node is in your chart. If it's connected to the south node, then it's related to a powerful ending or change, one during which you will be forced to release things or something significant. Now, would it also be related to whatever is happening with your south node in your chart? Possibly, but I've seen that kind of connection more so with a north node eclipse. So how do you know which node an eclipse is related to? Well, you'd need to read an ephemeris or ask your favorite astrologer. Hint, hint. So let's talk about the eclipses for 2024. Now, in a total solar eclipse, like the one coming up on April 8th, 2024, you will see a halo or aurora around the moon. So this center body here is the moon, and around it we see this ring, and then we see this outrageous halo or aurora bursting out, which is really the sun. It's not the moon, but it looks like it's around. It looks like a big sunflower, right? Okay, this is what most people think of when they think of an eclipse. You wear the special eclipse glasses. It's a big dramatic thing. The sky gets dark, and you feel like you've been through sort of some cosmic event. Okay, in a lunar eclipse, let's look at that. The Earth blocks out the sun's rays before they reach the moon, and the moon looks red, like it does in this picture. In a total lunar eclipse, The Earth blocks out the sun's rays before they reach the moon, and the moon looks red. In a penumbral eclipse, and this is the one we're going to have at the end of March, the moon passes through the Earth's shadow. Here's the Earth's shadow, which is called the umbra. The umbra is the part of the Earth, and this is included in the umbra, this half of Earth. The umbra is the part of Earth facing away from the sun, so it is also dark. There is the umbra, total darkness, and the penumbra, which is the shadow area on either side of the umbra. With the moon passing through the umbra, getting into that darkness, the surface of the moon is darkened because she is unable to receive the sun's light. And this is the explanation that I gave you before. When the Earth gets in between the moon and the sun, then we have our lunar eclipses. Okay. All right, so for 2024, we will have 4 eclipses. The first one coming up in March 25th of 2024 at 3:13 a.m. Eastern Daylight Savings Time will be a penumbral lunar eclipse at 5 degrees Libra, 7 minutes. That's going to be the penumbral eclipse. On April 8th, 2024 at 2:18 p.m. Eastern Daylight Savings Time, we will have a total solar eclipse. That's the one everybody's talking about. I'm going to be going to Watertown, New York to see this one, and it will be at 19 degrees Aries, 22 minutes, and that's going to be that big dramatic total solar eclipse with the big halo. On September 17th, 2024 at 10:45 a.m. Eastern Daylight Savings Time, we will have a partial lunar eclipse at 25 degrees Pisces 47. So that's one of them that I'll show you some pictures later. That might have some dramatic effect. And then on October 2nd, 2024 at 2:46 p.m. Eastern Daylight Savings Time, we will have an annular solar eclipse at 10 degrees Libra, 2 minutes. So we have 2 eclipses coming in Libra. And I got to tell you, my sun is at 10 degrees Libra. And even this 5 degrees Libra lunar eclipse is already kicking my butt. So there's no getting away from this stuff. The effects are real. It will happen if you have astrological points and planets that are sensitive to the degrees of the eclipse. If you don't, then it won't. All right, moving on. Now, let's go over what the real difference is between the solar and the lunar eclipse. And I'm hoping by going over and over this stuff, I'll finally nail it into my head and you can nail it into yours. Now, a solar eclipse only happens during a new moon. This is very, very important. It only happens during a new moon. And it is the result of the moon getting in between the Earth and the sun. This can form an illusion that looks like a halo around the moon. This picture shows the dark spot, which is the moon, blocking out the light of the sun, which is the halo around it. Looks like a big eye, doesn't it? Okay. And then the lunar eclipse can only occur during a full moon, when the sun and moon are opposite each other in the sky. That's the full moon. And this occurs because the Earth is in between the sun and the moon on a full moon. So you would think that it would block out one or the other, but it doesn't. What it shows you is the moon in red. So why does it turn red? Let's talk about that. So at a lunar eclipse, the moon can appear almost blood red because of the reflection from the Earth. So it's no longer reflecting light from the sun, but it is getting some light reflected to it from the Earth. Now, this is NASA's explanation. The sunlight passes through the Earth's atmosphere, which filters out most of the blue light. This makes the moon appear red to people on Earth. The total solar and the blood red partial lunar eclipses are just the most dramatic eclipses. There are actually different types of both solar and lunar eclipses. So let's look at them. Okay, So for lunar eclipses, there are three different types. There's the penumbral lunar eclipse. Again, this is the one we're going to have on March 25th, which is where the moon passes through the Earth's penumbral shadow, not the total umbra shadow, but the lighter shadow. Then we have a partial lunar eclipse where only a portion of the moon passes through the umbral shadow. That's the very darkest shadow. So that's a wild looking one. And then we have the total lunar eclipse where the entire moon passes through the Earth's umbral shadow. So let's take a look at each of those one by one. So first we have the normal, kind of the normal penumbral lunar eclipse. And this happens when the moon falls into the penumbral shadow. Remember our diagram, not the total darkness, but the outside the total darkness. And what happens is it just has a kind of a dark cap on it, kind of a fuzzy dark cap. And it's subtle, and a lot of people don't even notice this. They don't even know it's an eclipse. It's not very dramatic, but that's what the penumbral eclipse looks like. And then we have the partial lunar eclipse. Now this one really looks weird. I have never seen one of these live and in person. I'm sure I've gone through them and just missed it. But the partial lunar eclipse occurs when the sun, earth, and moon aren't exactly aligned. So only part of the moon passes into the Earth's umbral shadow. Now, this red is the result of the moon being in the umbral shadow. Now, remember, the umbral is the very, very dark part, but it still makes the moon look red. And so this is how it appears. And then we have the total lunar eclipse, which is the bright red one. And this takes place when the Earth comes between the sun and the moon, and its shadow covers the moon. So the moon turns red when the eclipse reaches totality. And so we'll just wrap this up by showing you a picture of each of the types of lunar eclipses. And you'll notice in my picture of this partial, it's not showing the red part at all. It's showing it's very, very dark, but you do see a portion of the moon. Now I will show you the path of totality of a total lunar eclipse. So in this slide, we see the evolution of the eclipse pretty much from start to finish. And you'll see that the main part of the eclipse where the moon is really red, that happens over the course of about an hour and a half. But over the course of several hours, we see it going from full moon and then into the umbra where it begins to pick up the red color. Then it's totally in the umbra where it is light red, then dark red at the greatest part of the eclipse. Then as totality ends, it begins to fade because it's moving towards the other side of the umbra. And then it takes on just the partial, where just a portion of the moon is red and the rest of it is, the silvery gray that we're used to. And then when it's out, it's just in the deep penumbral, which is also darkened on one side. You can see on this side, it's got that darkness. And that's several hours, but in the height of the actual eclipse is about an hour and a half. And you can see from here to here that it's, maybe about 45 minutes and then another like less than an hour for that. But most people are going to watch it just for the red, Okay, and I'm going to put in the description a link to a time-lapse video that shows you how the moon moves through the umbra, which is it's a really nice video. It's good. Okay, so now we've seen the total lunar eclipse. Now let's go on to the solar eclipses. Now there are 4 types of solar eclipses. The total solar eclipse is when the moon just blocks out the sun. The partial solar eclipse is when the moon only partially blocks out the sun. The annular, so not annual, annular solar eclipse is when the moon covers the sun's center and shows a ring of fire or annulus. Very interesting. And then we also have the hybrid solar eclipse, which is when the eclipse changes from an annular to a total and vice versa along its path of totality. And we do have an interesting picture of that, and also a very rare horizontal eclipse. Okay, so this is a picture of a total eclipse. A total solar eclipse occurs when the moon completely covers the sun, as seen from the Earth. The shadow formed by the umbra, the shadow of the moon, defines where on Earth people will be able to see the total eclipse. This is known as the path of totality. People on Earth who are near to but outside the path of totality will only see a partial eclipse. The path of totality is shaped like a narrow belt and is about 100 miles wide or 160 kilometers and 10,000 miles long or 16,000 kilometers. And this is the type of eclipse that most people think of when they hear the word eclipse. Now, NASA's explanation of how the moon can cover the sun, because we are a very big planet, the moon is very small compared to us, and the sun is just gigantic. So how can it be that when we have eclipses of the sun, just the little old moon can cover it up? Okay, so even though the moon is much smaller than the sun, because it is just the right distance away from Earth, the moon can fully block the sun's light from Earth's perspective. So the moon is 400 times smaller than the sun, but it's also 400 times closer to the Earth than the sun is. This means that from Earth, the moon and sun appear to be roughly the same size in the sky. And that's how the eclipses can happen visually for us. So that's the total eclipse. Let's take a peek at what a partial eclipse looks like. And that's the one that looks like somebody took a bite out of a cookie. And this is when the moon is only partially covering up the disk of the sun. So this is the sun part. The orange is the sun, and here's the moon, which is the eclipsing part. Now, I failed to mention, and I need to mention, anytime you are viewing a solar eclipse, you need to use eclipse glasses because it involves looking directly at the sun. So make sure that you get your eclipse glasses and, hang on to them from eclipse to eclipse. All right, so then the third type of eclipse for solar is the annular solar eclipse. An annular solar eclipse occurs when the new moon, remember solar eclipses are new moons, when the new moon covers the sun's center. So this dark is the moon, and the sun is peeking out behind it. And it leaves the edges to form a ring of fire, or an annulus. And last but not least, we have the hybrid solar eclipse. So a hybrid solar eclipse is a rare form of solar eclipse which changes from annular to a total solar eclipse and vice versa along its path. And the reason it is so amazing is because you are seeing the moon and the sun both showing in the same eclipse. This is also called a horizontal lunar eclipse. There are between 2 and 5 solar eclipses each year. Though during the 21st century, just 3.1%, which is 7 out of 224 of solar eclipses, are hybrid solar eclipses. So it's very rare to see these. Between 2000 BCE and 3000 BCE, just 4.8% of solar eclipses are hybrid events. And this picture is one amazing example of that type of event. That was in October 2014. So what happens with an eclipse according to astrology? Well, like solar eclipse, lunar eclipses also usher in unexpected changes. But similar to the full moon, this period is all about letting go and releasing. This superpowered full moon shines a karmic light on our path and forces a course correction. It often removes what is no longer serving us, even if we may feel like we're not ready for it. Now, if you also have planetary arrangements nudging you towards this change, the eclipse will open the door and shove you through it. Many times, the eclipse energy just takes the decision out of your hands and puts you in a different situation, forcing you to react or deal with it in a way that you probably should have been dealing with things for a while. In other words, the universe helps you change quickly. Eclipses are a time for you to grow. There are big lessons here, and allow the universe to teach you. Sometimes universes can speed up timelines. They can bring breaking points where we're inspired to finally make a change. Many times, the events brought about by the eclipse can help you accept a change that needs to be made, whether you want it or not. Now, accepting these things is a part of your soul's evolution, so it's really kind of silly and futile to resist it. I will include information and predictions for all the eclipses for this year. I've already filmed the full moon in Libra penumbral lunar eclipse for March 25th, and I will be doing eclipse videos for the other eclipses as well. In addition, I'm doing a short series about how the spring eclipses will affect Donald Trump and the royal family, and I may throw in a few other political figures. I hope you'll watch all of those videos as well. I'm close to my goal of 5,000 subscribers by the vernal equinox, so I hope you've subscribed, and I hope you'll also consider becoming a Cool Crone Coven member. Members get lots of fun perks, including special live streams where we answer your personal questions. Thank you so much for being a subscriber, and I look forward to helping you understand astrology and answering your questions in the future. Thank you for watching.